And now we're going to transition over to recruiting news and updates. It's getting to that time of year. We've got early signing day coming up on the 20th of December through the 22nd. You're going to see guys signing their letters of intent, and a lot of these guys are going to be enrolling early at their school to go ahead and be there for spring practice and all that good stuff. So what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks, we're going to keep an eye on the recruiting stuff up until that signing day, and then we will have a final signing day in February, but 95% of these guys are going to be locked up and ready to roll by then. So let's kind of go through these, and we've got a big piece of news that we've got to address right off the top here with the recruiting news. Dylan Raiola, five-star quarterback, originally from Arizona, but most recently played his high school ball at Buford High in Georgia, was committed to the Dogs. He's been committed to the Dogs after a decommitment from the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's been with the Dogs class for a little while now, a recruiting class that's currently ranked number 1 in the 24 class, according to 24/7. And all of a sudden, we see 24/7, Steve Wiltfong has got a crystal ball to Nebraska. This would be a huge get for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And as much as I've heard online that they don't think that this is about NIL, it sure does sound like it's about NIL. And we're going to tie this into something that we heard earlier in the show as well with Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming talking about going to Nebraska. How does this all tie together? And is this going to cause UGA to relinquish their top ranking in the 24 class?
Well, I think it depends on what site that you look at for 24/7. Even without Raiola, this Georgia would still be the number one overall class. There's still a chance that an Alabama, Ohio State, or a Florida State could sneak up and get Georgia, but I think that they will hold on to their number one class. First of all, um, but secondly. Um, I think that this is involving NIL. How could it not? Right? Why else would it?
Yeah.
Would that? What else could have happened within the past week that Raiola is now trending towards Nebraska? And I do see where Athens Steve, who's a notorious Georgia fan, now granted this is coming with some bias behind it, so take it with a grain of salt. But according to the spaces I listened to based on reporting, Raiola got an agent within the past month and wants UGA to match the $3 million that Nebraska is willing to pay him. On top of that, so it's not all about NIL, but it is partly about NIL. On top of that, Georgia told Raiola that if Beck declares for the draft, then they will go out and get a transfer quarterback. He didn't like hearing that, apparently. Now, I don't think that Beck is going to declare, but that's kind of my opinion. I think that what you have to look at, though, on top of this, is that all of this stuff with Steve Wiltfong is coming from the Nebraska coaches, right? It's coming from the Nebraska camp, maybe coming from Dylan Raiola's camp, but I haven't heard anything. So, as far as I know, everything that is coming out about about Raiola's decision, is coming from Nebraska because it fits what they want to do, right? It increases their chances with recruits. So a lot of this is coming from coaches telling recruits that we've got a shot at Dylan Raiola. Now, couple that with the fact that Raiola has actually reached out to some of these recruits for Nebraska as well, and it does sound like a pretty sticky situation. On top of that, Raiola is supposed to be starting his college practices this weekend at Georgia, and instead he's going to Nebraska to do another official visit. So I think that if you're reading the tea leaves, it sounds like Raiola is going to end up at Nebraska, but there's still, I guess, maybe like a 20% chance that he stays with Georgia. I don't think that at this point in his recruitment, there should be any reason for wavering, right? He's been sort of the bell cow recruit ever since the summer, and he's been the one, going out and talking to other recruits for this Georgia class. I think that where there's smoke, there's fire, and even as early as today, I was still kind of saying like, well, maybe there's a chance, but as I kind of dig further into this, I think that it's a pretty good bet that he's going to end up at Nebraska. Um, because of his and two, I think we have to mention his family ties for people who don't know. His dad, Dominic Raiola, played at Nebraska and played in the NFL as an offensive lineman. So there's a tie there. Also, his uncle is the offensive line coach at Nebraska, so there's a family tie there as well. Look, Nebraska was always going to have an inside, leg on this race, and they're I think that they're pulling out the NIL, trump card at this point and saying, hey, we need to be taken seriously as an organization and as a program in the NIL space for recruits to start paying attention to us. And what's and so and if you don't know, Nebraska does have a pretty good NIL presence, and I think that they're going to start flexing here as lately they have been, and I think moving forward you can start taking Nebraska a little bit more seriously in recruiting and in transfer portals under Matt Rule. I think that this fan base is ready to win some football games, and it's deserved. Um, they've been chomping at the bit, and they're not afraid to spend some money to go get a quarterback. Again, it's not all about money. I do think that Raiola has a better opportunity to start right away, but I don't know that that's necessarily the best opportunity, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So, even if Nebraska goes and gets Kyle McCord to start for a season or half a season or whatever, I think that Raiola, who has moved from I think it was Texas initially to Arizona, and then moved to Georgia in high school. This is all in high school. This past year, he played in Georgia near Athens. This past season to play in a better competition of football, and it was also to move towards Athens, given that he was supposed to be playing in Athens next year. But he's moved a lot to play in higher competition. He hasn't always been a quarterback. He was considered to be an offensive line prospect, really. I think through middle school, and it was up. I want to say it was his sophomore year that he decided to play quarterback. So
Yep.
this is a guy who is still pretty raw, considering all that. He's got a great arm, great size. All the attributes are there, but he really needs to think about his future and say, hey, am I better fit to sit for at least 1 year and then play for 2 seasons? Because I think that that's probably the better route to take. If he's worried about starting right away, then I just don't think that that's really in his best interest.
Yep.
And we saw him take a step up from Arizona to Georgia this past year and played at Buford, and he played okay. I mean, he was good. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't play like the number one player in the country, and we saw his recruiting ranking slide a little bit because of it. I just don't think that this guy's ready to go be a Big Ten starting quarterback,
Yeah.
and a D1 starting quarterback at that. In general, I do think that he'll have a better future playing at Georgia, playing behind a good offensive line. With potentially better weapons. We don't know what Nebraska is going to do moving forward. But I think that this is a really big head scratcher for those who follow recruiting. And, I'm just anxious as I'm as anxious as anyone to see where it goes from here. And I really think that if I had a crystal ball, I'd probably put it towards Nebraska too at this point. But what are your thoughts on this, Mark?
Well, all we can do is follow the visits, and he's taking a visit to Nebraska this upcoming weekend. He just had an in-house with Georgia offensive coordinator Mike Bobo. Apparently, everything went well. Look, Georgia's going to be fine. Whatever happens here, Georgia fans, just calm down. It's going to be just fine. This guy hasn't played a snap of college football. And look, if it costs $3 million to get Dylan Raiola to come to your school and not play the first year, is that worth it? Is that really worth it? because I mean, think of what else you could buy with that. And this is nothing against Dylan Raiola. He may be the next Tom Brady. I don't know. And in that case, I guess it would be worth it. And but I'm just asking the question: if you've got a $10 million NIL budget, is this guy worth 30% of it?
Yeah.
I don't know that that's true. Um, a lot of this started with his goodbyes. He started saying goodbye on social media to his school and everything, and then there's been some smoke with the Nebraska thing, and then $3 million. So we'll have to see what happens here. But nobody, this is a $3 million blind investment. You have no idea what you're getting, and I totally agree with you there. So whatever Dylan Raiola decides to do, he's going to get a bag for it for sure, and it'll be very interesting to watch. And it's a very high profile player that we're going to have to keep our eye on throughout this process.
Can
Let's
we talk a little bit before we move
mhm,
on about what this means for Georgia? Assuming Dylan Raiola does end up at Nebraska,
yeah,
um, because I think that a lot gets talked about what Nebraska is going to add. I think a lot of people don't realize like how little Georgia would be losing by Dylan Raiola not coming to Georgia.
yeah, yeah.
They've got Ryan Puglisi. What are your thoughts on Puglisi first of all, and then how do you feel that this will affect the Georgia program?
Well, look, I like the Puglisi family's approach to recruiting a little bit better. And look, I'm a Georgia fan, so I'll tell you that we don't make no bones about that. We don't try to hide it. We're Georgia fans, but we're college football fans first and foremost. And um, this is a drop in the bucket for Georgia, and for Nebraska. We talked about that $3 million. Is it worth it or not? It probably is worth it for them. I don't know that it's worth it for Georgia. You've got a room full of quarterbacks, and I'm assuming that Carson Beck is coming back. That's what I'm thinking. Apparently, he's been evaluated about the same, about third round or something like that, for this upcoming draft. And a guy who's got first round potential like that, um, that there's a big difference in going first round and third. I assume Carson Beck is coming back and hope that he's coming back. Um, with all that being said, I mean, you got Gunnar Stockton waiting in the wings. I mean, this is a guy that Georgia fans, there's a lot of Georgia fans that like what Gunnar Stockton brings to the table, and some have even said more so than what Brock Vandegrift had brought to the table. This is a cup that overflows,
Mhm.
and that's what these top teams do. They're expert talent accumulators, and whenever you accumulate this much talent in this day and age, your cup, it has to runneth over. I mean, otherwise you will be caught in a situation. So I think Georgia has done a really good job positioning themselves where this isn't going to make or break the Georgia football team. They weren't counting on this guy to come in next year and play or anything like that, or possibly even the first couple of years. So I think that it's just kind of a wait and see thing. And if you want to play for a contender, you're going to go play for a Georgia. And if you're just wanting playing time and you're wanting the bag, you'll go to Nebraska. And I think part of these kids' thought processes are, well, I can go get that $3 million and then I can transfer, and they're not wrong. So who knows where this story leads? As I said, we're early on in this chapter book, and we're not peeking ahead. There's no way to peek ahead with this book that we're reading here.
Yeah.
Anything else on Rayola before we move
Don't
on?
you think though? And you mentioned this. You kind of led into this talking about it. If you have a $10 million budget, why spend 3 million on Raiola? Specifically, if you're Georgia, right, and you
Right.
have Puglisi, who reminds me a lot of Carson Beck. And with his size and his arm, and this was also an Elite 11 quarterback. Like this isn't some lowly ranked 3-star that has potential. Like he's a pretty good quarterback, and someone that Todd Monken identified, and they had an option. They had the option to go get Julian Sayin in this class, and Sayin was pretty much ready to come in. And
Mhm.
Georgia said, "Well, we could get Raiola, but we also really like Puglisi." And so this is a guy who is coming out of a state up in the Northeast that doesn't really play a whole lot of like really good football. So I take it with a grain of salt. He was playing against lesser talent, but I think that's why his rating is what it is. And I think Georgia said, "Hey, we like his tools, we like his family and his commitment to Georgia. He didn't waver when Dylan Raiola came in. He did not shy away from competition, and he said, I'm here for a long haul. I'm here for the marathon and not a sprint. So I think that he's coming in with the right attitude of, yeah, I'm going to sit for 1, 2, maybe even 3 years. But eventually I'll get a shot. I'll learn during that time. And I still have a path to the NFL. And so I just want to give a lot of credit to him, first and foremost, but also going back to my point, $3 million. Let's say Georgia was going to pay $2 million, right? Wouldn't you rather see Georgia go out and get a bona fide receiver with $2 million this year to play with Carson Beck and try to go win
Mhm.
another championship? Because that's something that they don't have. So receivers notoriously are interested in getting paid, and
Yeah.
so if you're going to throw $2 million at a position group, I think that Georgia would be better fit to throw it at receiver than they would quarterback. And I think that maybe there's a little bit of addition by subtraction here for Georgia, and they've got to spin it in a positive way somehow, right? So why not do it with a big name, SEC receiver, maybe like a Luther Burden, who's been rumored to want to go out and win a championship, who's not in the transfer portal. Don't get me wrong, but um, maybe Georgia just I don't know, sends him like a late night text from a burner phone and says, "Hey, we got $2 million with your name on it if you want to come."
A little bit of that hotline bling.
Yeah, I mean, let's not pretend that teams aren't out there doing that.
Of
So,
course they are.
um, but I think that it's interesting to take the Georgia angle on this as well, and wonder if they might spin it in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And for the record, I think it's probably worth the investment for Nebraska. Just the
Yeah,
publicity alone.
I agree.
Nebraska needs a spark, and if $3 million gets you that spark, and it gets other players on campus, eh, you have to take that chance if you're Nebraska. So kudos to Nebraska for getting the bag man all ponied up and headed over to Dylan Raiola's place. It seems like it's working, as he will be visiting this coming up weekend. And you know what? We want to thank everybody for watching the show. We're not done yet. We've got some more recruiting news that we're going to get to here. But if you're watching this, welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. We are so glad that you are here. We're building a community of college football fans from coast to coast, and this is a show by fans for fans. We're just a couple of college football fans. So if you would, it'd be very helpful, if you don't mind, to hit the thumbs up on the video. That helps us out a lot. Free of charge there to do that and help you boys out. Let's keep going through this recruiting news, and we're